All right, everybody, good afternoon. Super Bowl on the horizon here, just a couple of hours away. And we've got some more linebackers to look at, and the show goes on regardless of any Super Bowl activities that may be happening. So, earlier today, this morning, we took a look at some linebackers who would command a big salary and were high profile players in this league and would hopefully at least give you superstar play. This video is gonna lower our gaze just a little bit here. We're going to take a look at some guys who are probably still of a starting caliber. They're pretty good. You're probably getting competent play from most of them. Maybe one or two of them could ascend to a level beyond what you're currently thinking. But realistically, you're just looking for guys who are either going to be solid starters, like decent starters, or guys who are going to compete for a starting job. That's kind of the range here. So these are going to be guys who cost anywhere from, I'd say, 4 million a year to 8 million a year. Again, for guys like this, the market is very, very inconsistent. What would one year be 6 million a year turns into 2 million a year the next year just because the money's all gone. Like, that stuff happens. So with that being said, let's try our best to figure out the way things might go for these collection of players. Let's start with Deion Jones. This is a guy who's been a star player in this league before, but it's been a couple years since he's been that. He established himself really well in Atlanta. He was a Pro Bowler in 2017. Seemed like everything was just going great. And then things took a really bad turn, and he ended up actually getting shipped out of Atlanta, went to Cleveland, didn't play a ton last year, played a decent amount, but nothing compared to what he was doing in Atlanta. And now he enters free agency having made a pretty good chunk of money, but trying to rebuild his reputation as an elite linebacker. You go to PFF, you can see like his grade for 2022 was bad. Run defense atrocious, coverage wasn't particularly good. You go back to 2021, and it really wasn't that good either. If PFF, thank you. In fact, it was really bad, like some of worst in the league bad. Now you go back to 2020, you can find some stuff that's actually pretty good. You can find some pretty decent grades here, but Deion Jones is a guy who's probably going to be looking to get a big contract next year after he rebuilds his reputation in 2023. So I'm thinking something like 1 year, 5 million, maybe 1 year, 4 million. And then he hopes to have a big year launching himself into a big contract next year. So somewhere between $4 and $5 million for 1 year. Anthony Walker is a player who is kind of in a similar position. He was never really an elite linebacker the way Deion Jones was, or at least the way Deion Jones was tracking. But he had a pretty good run as a middle linebacker in Indianapolis. He had 3 years where he was basically a full-time starter, good quality player. And then the last 2 years, he's found himself in Cleveland. He barely played last year because of an injury, only played in 3 games. The year before that, he missed a handful of games as well. So his play seems to have dropped off a little bit, and his ability to stay on the field has dropped off in a big way. PFF actually thought he played quite well in the few games that he did play in 2022. You go back to 2021, the grade is still pretty good, but his reputation is not ideal right now. I mean, if you go back to his last full season played, the last year he played in Indy, the grade is not good. Now, Spotrac actually has a contract projection for him, 1 year, 4.4 million. So that's very similar to what I think Deion Jones is going to get. I guess you could say both these guys are in a similar position where they're trying to rebuild their reps after having their reputations get tarnished a little bit by having not such great seasons. So Anthony Walker Jr. to me is a guy you bring in, hold the fort down for a year, like a 1 year deal, trying to get that big contract next year. Workable option. Another workable option would be Azeez Al-Shaair from the San Francisco 49ers. Did not play that much in 2022, and now he's a free agent. But when he did play a lot of games, or excuse me, a lot of snaps in 2021, he did some pretty good stuff. Had over 100 tackles in just 13 games. Excuse me. Um, was part of a pretty good defense over there in San Fran. I mean, just in general, since this guy's been in the league, San Fran's defense has been really, really good. So Aziz Al-Shaair is definitely a candidate to be picked up by a team that will give him a full starting opportunity and become a great player. As you can see in San Fran, he typically was not that. In fact, the first couple years in the league, he only started in 9 total games. He became a full-time starter in 2021 and then saw his playtime reduced significantly last year. PFF is pretty happy with the way he played in 2022. That was the year he played a little bit reduced. Now, 2021 was the year he played a lot. They weren't crazy about it, but not too down on it either. Still pretty decent. So, this Al-Shaair guy is, in my opinion, a candidate to maybe get better as he gets more opportunities. It will be interesting to see. He's only going to turn 26 this year. So, definitely on the table is somebody who could ascend. Denzel Perryman would be my next guy. This guy's a pretty established veteran, and like Deion Jones, he's made a Pro Bowl, but unlike Deion Jones, he's actually done it in the last couple of years here. He was a longtime Charger, had pretty good success over there, and then he went to the Raiders in 2021 and exploded. Made the Pro Bowl, had over 150 tackles. We might remember him. I believe he was the guy who picked off Geno Smith last year. Even though he didn't have as good of a season, he still made his presence known, still was certainly an effective player. And I think that Denzel Perryman will likely emerge as one of the top targets for the Seahawks this offseason if they decide to utilize the free agency to fix their linebacker issues, which very possible. This is kind of the quintessential guy who's going to be a competent, capable veteran. You go to PFF, they thought he played really well in 2022. This was the most recent year, the year where he didn't play every game because of injuries, but they were generally pretty high on the way that he played. And even in 2021, this was the Pro Bowl year. You can see that they didn't like him as much, but still not terrible. And again, I think PFF is still working to figure out this whole linebacker thing. I think sometimes they just whiff on these grades. I think that there's might be some layer of the way in which front sevens work together, or defenses in general work together, that they don't totally get. So Denzel Perryman would be near the top of my list. Another guy who I would strongly consider would be Leighton Vander Esch. This is, of course, a Dallas Cowboy. He turned 27 just a couple of days ago, actually, so still relatively young, still in his prime. He's a bigger player. He has some experience in a 3-4 defense because he was, excuse me, I'm sorry, a 4-3 defense. That's the role that he was playing for Dallas for a little while there. And he also has some experience with a Dan Quinn defense because that's where he's been the last couple years. So the Dan Quinn defense is the Pete Carroll defense. So if we're going back to that type of defense, maybe this makes sense. Now, Vander Esch has had a very interesting career arc. He peaked in his rookie year. His rookie year, he had 140 tackles, 2 interceptions, was playing really well, made the Pro Bowl, and since then, he's had a little bit of a hard time staying healthy. He's missed a decent chunk of games, and he hasn't been playing as much, and he hasn't been playing as effectively. However, in 2022, he took a pretty small deal to stay with Dallas, and he actually had a little bit of a bounce back year. His grade from PFF was quite strong for 2022 and a noted improvement over previous years where he was just kind of okay. So I think that guys like Denzel Perryman and Leighton Vander Esch, you're probably looking at something like 1 year $6 million or 2 years $12 million, and you're probably going to get your money's worth out of that. So we've got Rashaan Evans. This is another guy who I think should be near the top of the list. He's had another. He's another one of these guys who built up his reputation pretty well, and then it kind of fell off a little bit. And then with his 2022 in Atlanta, where he played every game and had almost 160 tackles, started to rebuild it a little bit. Now, Atlanta, not a very good team, not a very good defense. So I don't want to go crazy with the praise here, but we are talking about a guy who has some experience in a 3-4 defense and now a 4-3 defense because of the year he spent in Atlanta. So there's a little bit of versatility there. There's a history of pretty strong production. He has been part of some good defenses. Some of those defenses he played on in Tennessee were solid. PFF is lukewarm on him. They gave him an okay grade for 2022. You go back to 2021 and it's like, wow, barfing in my mouth. 2020, nothing really that good. You go back to 2019, yeah, not really. I mean, it's PFF doesn't like him, and that's definitely something to consider as you're trying to evaluate him as a player. In fact, you have to go back to 2018 to find the last time they gave him a good grade. But for whatever it's worth, they actually think he had one of his better years in 2022, which isn't saying much. Spotrac actually has a contract projection for him, 2 years, 9 million. That's probably pretty good value for a guy you can expect to start. Last guy I want to look at here is, in my opinion, maybe the most interesting guy of all of these, Alex Singleton. This guy just turned 29 in early December, so he'll be turning 30 late in the 2023 season. Was not exactly the biggest of names before 2022. He played for Philly for a few years, played well, but I didn't get the sense he was like a super hot commodity. He ended up signing a very small contract with the Denver Broncos, and he killed it. Over 160 tackles. His PFF score was really good, and he was part of one of the best defenses in the league, that Denver defense. So it seems like he's ascending to the point where he's now one of the better linebackers in the league. And after getting such a meager contract in free agency last year, this is a guy who's probably going to come into some pretty serious money. And Denver, I mean, they're going to have to make some choices, right? Pretty soon they're going to have to pay Pat Surtain. Pretty soon they're going to have to pay... well, actually, not even soon. Now they're going to have to try to pay Draymond Jones. The Wilson money is going to kick in a year, or the big Wilson money is going to kick in a year. So they're going to have to let some of these guys go. And Alex Singleton, I could see him wanting something like 3 years, 24 million. Maybe the most expensive of all the guys I've gone over in this video. But the way he played in 2022, he probably deserves it. And I got to believe that the Seahawks, one way or the other, are going to at least look at it. So that would be my first wave of more middle of the road linebackers, guys who aren't going to be super duper expensive in this upcoming free agency period. Let me know what you think. I'm going to have another video later today with some more options, and yeah, probably going to have to go look at a lot of these guys.